Hey guys, welcome to Now That's Debatable. This is your host, Fantastic Prasad. We are live and back again, and we have
We on YouTube?
a guest. Yes, we're on YouTube. Interrupting, but yeah, we
My
have a
bad.
recurring guest. Welcome back to Niko, who's been on the show before. Had some good discussions, good respectful discussions. It's nice to have you back, Niko. We should be live everywhere. So, do you see us everywhere, AAA?
I don't. Not YouTube yet. It could just be me. If
See
you
my
see us on YouTube, I
screen.
trust you.
I will
Not-
go there real quick. In the meantime, introduce the topic, and if we need to start over, we
Okay,
can do
yeah.
so.
So yeah, the topic today was going to be sexual education in public schools, and whether or not it should occur at all. If so, I do see it. If it should occur, like how should it happen? So I guess Niko, if you could give me like just your rundown. So we have a teacher and a school. We can specify public schools, but we just talk about just like education in general. Public, private doesn't matter. There's a teacher. There are several underage pupils, right? Let's say they're the third graders. Should sex education be a topic at all?
Good question and good topic. First off, I'll say thank you all for having me. It's glad to be back, and I look forward to this discussion.
We got a
So,
fellow Liberty grad or student. Don't know who because we don't know who they are, but they've been watching us very, very frequently. So we appreciate you coming in again. Their name on Twitch is Punch Drinker, and they've been tuning in every week. And they said, "Hey, it's a good guest, Liberty in the house." So just wanted to give you that before you get started. You got some
that's
support
nice,
already.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Shouts out to Liberty, man. And our football team is currently undefeated and ranked.
Yeah.
That's right. It ranked. So,
Hell you.
yes, indeed. You know what it is. Well, cool. That's cool to hear. But yeah, so as far as your question, should sex education be taught in schools? I'm gonna go with no. It should not.
Okay. No, like no discussion at all. So who would you say like children just shouldn't be taught about sex? Or
No, I would not say that. No, that's not what I would say. I would say that I would say in general that's something that educators should expect and even encourage if they feel inclined to do so, that should happen at home. Whoever the caretakers are, sex education should be totally dependent upon people at home.
Sure. So ideally, your parents will be able to teach you everything. They will teach you math,
Certainly.
physics, chemistry, all that kind of stuff, right?
Absolutely.
But some people don't have parents that are capable of teaching those things
Mhm.
to effectively. So
Mhm.
what about children that are in those positions, right? Like you have a kid, I have a kid. Not everybody has fathers like us that's going to teach them, what's right and wrong, what's appropriate and what's not. So there are millions of children that are not in those fortunate situations.
Mhm.
How do they learn about this?
Well, there are millions of children who have all sorts of circumstances, from fatherlessness to absentee father to present but emotionally, psychologically not present father, and the list goes on. But the majority of students who attend school have caretakers. The majority of students who attend elementary school, middle school, high school have caretakers at home, despite who they may be. So not just the parents, but more specifically, their caretakers. And I think oftentimes we expect our public school system to fill in a lot of gaps that our parents do not, which I do understand that expectation, because at the end of the day, if you're trying to lead society to where it is best at, right? I think it's good for high school students and intern college to have a reasonable amount of knowledge on sex and, the various forms of it and the implications should you choose to engage in sex. Absolutely. But I think sometimes we put the onus on our school system to fill in those gaps, and it's not their responsibility. And quite frankly, I think oftentimes when they are given that power to fill in those gaps, they do so in a way that's bias, and they teach things that a lot of parents would be in would be upset that they're teaching their students.
So what about what is specifically about children that don't have, that kind of guidance? Because like they're going to learn about it regardless.
Certainly.
Like I'll tell you, like my first encounter with any sort of sex education, it was from my friends, not from my parents, not from. I went to a Christian school, and I didn't know much about it. I thought the male would stick his penis inside the female's belly button and pee. That's really what I thought. Yes, it's as stupid as that is. That was my understanding, right? So, but it becomes. The risk becomes even greater than that. Like, for instance, like you have children that are being sexually abused, right? They may not know it because they don't have a sexual education.
Sure.
So, like, what about children like that?
Well, what about them? What exactly are you asking?
So the parents. So what I'm saying is, there may not be an adult outside the school system that's able to teach them. So that's why I would think sexual education is important. That's not the only reason, but that's just one of the reasons that not everybody's fortunate enough to have parents or any sort of guardian outside of school that could properly teach them these things.
Absolutely.
And they just won't know if we just rely on parents. Just like there's a lot of people, if we were to rely on parents to teach certain things like biology. Right. So there's a huge disconnect between the scientific community and the church. Right. So like, they don't want their kids learning about evolution. Right. So if we just left it up to the parents, there's just a lot of things they just wouldn't know. Now, with sexual education, the consequences have much more gravitas. Right? Because this is stuff like not knowing about, Homo erectus or the Neanderthals. That's one thing, but not knowing something about STDs and STIs, and what's appropriate and what's inappropriate behavior. This could have life altering, consequences. And outside of the school system, that type of education may not be available to me. So you're putting this onus on the parents, which I agree it should be, but
I was just gonna ask that. Am I wrongfully putting the onus on the parents? But
okay. Well, we know. So you're not wrong, but what we know for a fact is that a lot of parents aren't going to fulfill that role.
Certainly.
So can I just really quick, and it's not to change the subject entirely, it's just a more of a curiosity. Do you think education should be required in general? Do you think children should be forced to go to school and learn any subject?
Myself?
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
But you make an exception for like sex ed specifically. Like you think like maybe math is fine and English and like literature comprehension and reading, writing, history, etc. All those are fine, but kind of sex ed's kind of an exception to the rule because of where it stands in how people interact with it.
Well, I think so let me clarify. So first off, since the start of this conversation, we've just said sex education, and that's a pretty big umbrella.
It is.
And so maybe we should narrow down and get more specific about what exactly we mean when we say sex education.
So it would vary based on the age group, right? So we're not going to be teaching 12th graders the same thing that we're going to be teaching first graders. Okay. But they all should know about it. Like for instance, like my little girl is 3. She has gotten very age appropriate sex education. Sure. She knows there are certain places that people shouldn't be touching her.
Sure.
Right. And so now we go up to like 12th grade. Maybe there is far more in depth than we're talking about use of condoms, contraception, and stuff like that, STDs, STIs, right? So I guess it would vary.
Sure. But, okay. So
the only reason I asked that, and just to kind of set the tone of where I was going, so it's not like I don't want you to think I'm trapping you or anything. It's just I'm not disagreeing in the fact that children with educated parents should get sex education from their parents. But the purpose of educational systems such as schools is to provide people a place to go and get an education perhaps beyond what their parents might have had. For instance, my parents, one of them I don't even know if he graduated high school, my father, right? So to have him to try to teach me high school math when he was 50 years old wouldn't be a great thing for me, but an educational system in which you have somebody who has a degree in mathematics would be a much better fit to teach me mathematics, right? So I would say the same for all subjects, including sex ed, and obviously, just like Triple A was pointing out, it obviously is going to be age appropriate and correlate to the age of the children, but I would say that for most subjects, unless you happen to be an expert in that subject, a qualified educator is probably a better choice than even a home education. I think the home education should reinforce that. And it should have, obviously, you're going to have your own personal kind of vestment into certain types of education and the way that people kind of take knowledge. But I would much like if it was, if I had a child, which I have no children of my own, so it's a little biased to say in general, but if I had a child of my own and I needed them, to learn like pre-history of, Europe in the 1700s, I mean, like, I got some basics, but like, a guy who has a degree, a PhD in history in the 1700s is undoubtedly going to be able to teach them a lot more than I am.
Certainly, which is why as soon as you mentioned your question, I wanted to be more specific about what we meant by sex education. So now that that's clear, let me kind of go deeper. So yes, I do believe that education is important. I do think that there are more or less experts who have formal education in subjects, and they're better equipped to teach students than a lot of times their parents are, most assuredly. So I think in this conversation, we've included these things in sex education, but let me be specific. So I believe that it's okay for a public school, private school to speak on the anatomy of the human body and biological processes that the human body goes through, which in effect, essentially could be considered sex education because you're referring to the sexual organs. But I think the extent of sex education, if any, in schools should be on topics and not topics, that's not the word I'm looking for, but it should focus on the objective scientific things that we know about the human body, like anatomy, like what a penis is and what its actual function is, what a vagina is, what its function is, what breasts are, what their function are. And so that should be the extent of sex education in school. That's what I wanted to clarify, because I don't necessarily, and the reason I don't necessarily think, I guess it could, but I don't know if I necessarily consider that sex education because it's more biology, right?
So are you opposed to things like teaching, even upwards of like high schoolers about things like contraception and birth control? Would you be opposed to that altogether, especially when it comes to like hormonal regulation in females? Because that's
my knee-jerk reaction is no, I would not be opposed to that, just because, again, it deals with the function of the body. So not to have a little sex education lesson here on the podcast, but no, it's like in actuality, there's a substance that exits the penis and enters the vagina. And once those, then a baby comes down the line and what have you. So then because that's an actual biological function, then I think it makes sense to talk about preventative tools that people use, people who are engaged in sexual activity that they use. And so I think, again, I think the line should be drawn. Well, first off, my knee-jerk reaction to should sex education be in schools is no, it should not, because of the slippery slope that it can be. However, it is the things that you can and can't talk about. So if I'm saying that I believe the scientific and biological things should be talked about, period, right? Then it's like, well, is fellatio scientific? Is it right?
Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
That's something to be brought up. That's something to be brought up, and talk about the risk associated with that. And the people who know about that risk, they might be less inclined to do it, because some people might think that that's something that comes with no risk at all. I'm like, no, that's actually can be a pretty dangerous thing to do.
Mhm.
You know, especially
I mean,
if you
it
don't
gets
know that person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
So
and
then-
not to get
so
even
right, so
more
then-
into it, but when it comes to like the reverse role, which the technical term is cunnilingus, it can actually be even more dangerous for females, especially for people that don't have the necessary hygiene that comes along with that, or if
Certainly.
things aren't taught in or done in a particular order or direction, if you know what I'm saying, without getting too nasty about it. But that can lead to things like STIs and yeast infections and things like that. So even though these are clearly sexual acts, there are undoubted risks that I believe people should be informed of in school.
Yeah. Debatable. In school.
Okay,
That's
so
the name of the show.
What are you afraid of would happen? Like, what are you afraid of would happen?
What's the worst case?
you-
Like, let's say slippery slope has come and gone, right? We're at the end. We're at the bottom of the trail, right? And everything has crashed. What do you think's happening in a public school sex education?
I think if you have educators encouraging students to engage in certain activities,
that
I
would
think
be
that-
inappropriate. So that would
Yeah.
definitely be inappropriate. But I don't think
correct.
that-
But that's what I mean when I said slippery slope, because you know it's because you said now we're all the way at the end. We've slid all the way down the slope. Now we're at the bottom, and this is what we arrive at. But here's the thing: it's hard to catch that when it's halfway down the hill. It's hard.
But I mean, slippery slopes can be done with anything, right? I mean, so you could.
Certainly.
You said there's a slippery slope with chemistry, and you teach children how to make bombs, right?
Certainly.
So I mean, so the way you do it is you find a age appropriate balance,
Mhm.
right? So I guess we would agree that what we want in a world where children become adults and have the most accurate information to make the best choices possible, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
We say, okay, so are you afraid that teaching sex ed will somehow increase the prurient interest in children?
I
Like, for
wouldn't, say
instance,
I wouldn't say I'm afraid of that, but I could imagine that could be a result.
okay, so I've looked into the data for that, and there's been nothing actually suggesting that.
Sure.
So so like in the places where it's not taught, actually those minors tend to engage in much more reckless sexual activities.
Mhm.
And in places where it is mandatory, not just prevalent, but mandatory, they tend to be more responsible.
Sure.
So wouldn't those results, looking at that, wouldn't you say, hey, let's teach it?
Well, there's a lot of blankets in there. It's like, let's teach it. Let's teach what? And then you say in the areas or whatever data you gather this from, in areas where it's not taught at all, the students are a lot more reckless.
All right.
So,
let's get some worst case
in order
scenario.
for me to speak intelligently on it, I'd have to know,
Gotcha.
a little more detail about the variables.
I'm being very ambiguous. Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
So
not
all
that I don't trust you. I'm just saying,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. So like let's talk about like high schoolers. All right. So at that level, it's extremely graphic.
Yeah.
I don't say extremely graphic. I mean, it's not pornographic. I mean, but sometimes like there's videos shown where it's just like coitus happening.
Sure.
They'll show the penis entering the vagina,
Yeah.
stuff like that. Okay. And so like you'd be opposed to something like that, right?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. All right. I honestly, I don't know where I stand on that. I would need to see some sort of use in it if it's somehow helpful. And I know for some people it could be because like there are a lot of minors whose parents, they tend to shy away from it altogether.
Certainly.
And they know absolutely nothing about it.
Yep.
And so
absolutely.
Right. So
and I've had those repellent sensations even as a parent, and all my children are girls. So I've had that sort of tightness in my chest of like, oh gosh, is this really a reality that we now are entering into? Which obviously it is, because they're humans. So, it is what it is. But yeah, I understand. People are repellent to have that conversation, have those conversations.
So in light of that, would you at least agree that it should be taught?
What is it?
Sex ed. So like, let's say like age appropriate. So the things that are relevant. So like, that's what I'm saying. Like we're not necessarily talking about coitus. Yeah, we're not talking about coitus for like 4 or 5 year olds. They're not necessarily having sex. But.
I have witnessed educators and lawmakers co-sign and promote ideologies that I personally
ideologies. Okay, all right. So you're probably calling something the ideology that I call.
Wait, hold on. No, wait. I have a different point. I'm just saying that promote and support ideologies that ideologies that I would consider to be borderline lunacy, and so I think sex education is a tough one for me to say it should be taught, because what is it? What are we teaching? Who's doing the teaching? And what have we agreed upon that is necessary to be taught?
What would you say that has been co-signed that you would label as lunacy?
Well, it's not anything to do with sexual education, but it's just there are just things that I think are completely just.
Because you be specific about the ideologies. I feel like we're about to go into some trans territory. But like, just go there, man. If I'm wrong.
No, I wasn't saying anything about trans territory, but we could go.
Okay.
We could go in that territory.
I would be opposed to something that is crazy being taught to children as truth. Okay, but what specifically? Because I know
can I
that
do something interesting?
I know some people. I know politicians who would co-sign some really crazy things about biology and things about physics, right? And so that doesn't mean that those topics should be avoided in school. Like there are politics. The new Speaker of the House, this guy literally believes that a cosmic deity spoke the universe into existence. Okay. Okay.
Listen, I'm sorry if I peek the audio down. He believes that. No way.
Yes, he does believe that.
And you don't.
No.
And not to get off subject here, but how did the universe come into being? Just out of my curiosity.
We really getting way off topic here. But
no, I know. I just I'm sitting here speaking to you on a MacBook, and it's a very intricate device, and everything in my mind tells me it didn't grow out the ground and that it was created because intellect begets intellect, and certainly this device shows
not always.
This device shows keen intellect.
Macs, of course, MacBooks do that. Universes, yes, there's no reason to think universes don't. And also that there's like stars, planets, all that kind of stuff. We know natural processes that they come about. So there's no reason to include intelligence.
But just to end this, I just want to end. I don't want to go too down the rabbit hole. I just want you to tell me, so how did, in your opinion, how did the Earth come into being? How existence come into being?
The Earth. Well, not existence itself. Existence had to always be.
Sorry, not existence. The universe.
The universe.
And everything within.
Okay, all right. I don't know if there is a beginning of the universe. I know there's a point at which we can begin to describe the universe. That's called the Planck era, right? Okay. Or the Big Bang, right? And that's when we can start making sense of things.
Sorry, before that, Bang?
Or the Planck. I call it just the Planck era. So at that point, gravity stops making any sense to us, but we know it played some role, but we just can't describe any further than that.
Okay.
Yeah, the evidence for that, CMBR, cosmic inflation, there's plenty of evidence for that. It definitely happened. That is a fact.
So I
Okay.
want to
Okay,
get
but
back
okay,
on topic
but
and do
what
something
I
You
was
should
gonna
interesting.
be Speaker of the House.
all right, but what I was talking about was that just because a politician believes crazy ideas about a
Mhm.
particular topic doesn't mean that that topic shouldn't be taught altogether, right?
So, do you think
So
in public schools that politicians' ideas should be taught? And by the way, when I say taught,
so mhm.
I don't mean discussed and criticized from two different sides. I mean taught, because in school the subjects that were taught, they're taught as fact.
So what should be taught in school is our best scientific understanding, and that changes, right? Because science is subject to change, right? So
Sure.
you look back 20 years ago, or 40 years ago, the way physics was taught is very different than it does now.
Sure.
Back in colleges, they thought, there is too much mass in the universe, so the gravity is eventually going to slow down the cosmic expansion. It's going to collapse in on itself. We know now that's actually not true at all. The cosmic inflation is actually increasing due to something that we call this phenomenon dark energy. And it's just a placeholder. We don't know why, but it's expanded. There's no reason to think it's going to collapse on itself. So as we learn more, the academic consensus, our best scientific understanding, will change. But whatever is the best understanding now, that is what should be taught. And it should be taught with not as this is some ultimate truth that will never change. No, it should be taught with an understanding that the confidence level is proportionate to the amount of evidence that we have right now.
Sure, that makes sense to me. Sure. The problem is.
So I was going to go here, and if I can, and I'll
Yeah,
make it quick, is that I thought I was going to do something kind of interesting. I was going to read you off one of the statutes. So there are currently 28 states that require sexual education. And I was just going to, since they're listed alphabetically, and Arizona is the first on the list, and it's relatively short, I was just going to read you the actual statute and see if you have any opposition to this particular statute. Now, I'm not saying this applies to every state, but to specifically Arizona statute. It says, each school district may provide instruction on HIV and AIDS. At the minimum, instruction shall be medically accurate, age-appropriate, promote abstinence, discourage drug abuse, and dispel myths regarding the transmission of HIV. That is how they define their law on sexual education in Arizona.
Okay. There's nothing in there that I heard that I disagree with. And I think some of those points is exactly what I was alluding to. I do think if that's all they have on the books regarding sex education, I think they could stand to be a tad bit more thorough in as far as what can and can't be taught. But then again, I would understand why lawmakers would avoid doing so.
It gets really complicated the more stuff you add into a law. Being a little vague is a good way to kind of set you up for a court case in the future. It's a good...
But I like to get back to the ideology thing. Like, can you be specific?
No. I think you might be. Well, you might be misunderstanding what I'm saying, though. I'm not. Okay. I'm not referring to a specific ideology that relates to this discussion. I'm just saying, it kind of like how you said about the Speaker of the House. Mm-hmm. It's just, you think that his opinion on the origin of the universe doesn't make any sense, or it's crazy to think that.
Well, yes, but so it's not even that is crazy, because there are things that are observational facts that sound crazy to me, right?
Certainly.
Like, it's a lot of things in quantum mechanics that sound crazy to me, but they're demonstrable facts.
Sure.
The issue that I have is he's saying it as fact, and there is no data backing up what he says, and that's where I draw the line, right? So if what they're saying,
do you believe everything in our existence can be explained with data?
No, but if you're going to be teaching it in school as a fact, you need to back it up with data. You need to
right, but him holding that belief is not the same as teaching it in school. Although I'm sure he would encourage it to be taught in school because he believes it's fact. But the two are not the same, though.
Oh yeah. Definitely, and that's why I thought we're talking specifically about how it's handled, like what type of things are taught in schools, like versus things that are academic consensus or things that you would consider ideology. And there are a lot of things. Now, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there's a lot of things that are scientific facts that conservatives tend to label as ideologies.
Like what?
Well, I mean, there's okay. So just about everything and anything to do with trans things, they tend to do that with. They tend to do with a lot of fields in biology, a lot of things.
Now you said. So your first half of the sentence where you said you said the first half and then you said, but conservatives tend to label it as ideology. Can you repeat the first half? There are a lot of things that what?
There are a lot of things that are based on the best scientific data that we have now, and conservatives tend to label them as ideologies. Completely.
If you want to jump down this rabbit hole, I don't want to steer the conversation of the show in the wrong direction. But if you can we
go ahead.
That a little bit?
Let's go.
No, I'm asking you, like, what are some things that conservatives label as ideologies that the best scientific data we have states otherwise?
Oh, that trans people even exist.
Okay.
Right. So, like, I mean, there are. I see this on the right all the time. I mean, like, I can sit here and name names if you like, but there are people who are just I
just heard somebody on the right say that. I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, people who are what you want to call their brainchild, or I guess the mouth of the right, they tend to say things like a trans woman is just a dude who thinks he's a man, right? Like stuff like that. They don't want any sort of they don't want any sort of like ideas about transgenderism taught in schools at all, even though it is a demonstrable fact that the youth is dealing with these things. And they think that it'd be better. Like I saw a meme some friend of mine posted on Facebook, and it showed the response to a trans youth. There's a little kid, and he tells his mom, he's like, "Hey mom, I think I'm a girl," and she says, "No, you're not." And I was like, the end of the discussion, and that was showing how that was supposed to be the only appropriate response to that, and that doesn't work, right? That's just like gay conversion stuff, right? And so they call our best scientific means of dealing with stuff like that ideologies, and that's not what it is.
Okay, certainly. So, a couple things, just in reference to that meme. Not that a meme is any sort of verifiable, whatever. But so I think, and perhaps I'm not familiar with the meme necessarily. I've seen stuff like that, but perhaps it's alluding to that expression coming from people who do not have any sort of gender dysphoria and who are participating in what's become a very popular perhaps fad. And again, I'm not saying that's what transgenderism is. I'm saying if someone has received that information or felt that they want to express themselves as a woman and they're a boy, or a girl and they're a boy and they're a girl, then I don't think every person who has that expression suffers from gender dysphoria. And so perhaps that's an appropriate response to a certain percentage of people who make an expression like that.
I would say that's a never appropriate response. There was no investigation at all. The
investigation should be first and foremost. I do agree, but
that would be shutting it down. Like my little girl told me she thought she was a boy. I wouldn't just say no, you're not. And
I think that's a good thing.
But that is never okay. The appropriate response would be, at minimum, why do you think that?
Certainly. And I think that's how I would respond too. But what I'm asking is, well, first off, it sounded like a second ago you agreed that perhaps there are a percentage of people who have an expression like that who are actually not suffering with those feelings at all.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
There's most children who develop gender dysphoria, it tends to go away.
Okay,
around adolescent, and this is about 90%.
Okay, gotcha.
But when we talk about the transition rates, so like when it doesn't go away and when they transition, the rate of detransitioning is less than 1%, which shows how good we are at identifying actual instances of gender
No, it
dysphoria.
doesn't. No, it doesn't.
How would if it was a
that just shows that the detransition rate is 1%. But there could be a number of factors why someone doesn't want to participate or expose themselves to detransitioning, whatever that is.
Yeah, and we've looked into that, and there are studies for that. And the number one reason is actually finances, right?
Because I've not looked into those studies, but I'm just saying it is not concrete. But it's not concrete that just because the detransition rate is 1%, therefore the accuracy is 99%.
Well, sure. I'm saying it's a very good indication, because if we weren't
a very good indication.
It seems to be. I don't see how you could look. How could you look at a low detransition rate and think that we're bad at this?
There's no way you can calculate the percentage of people who participate in any detransitional process versus the people who want to, wish they would have never transitioned, thought it was a mistake, are now, as a result of their transition, suicidal, depressed, and there's no way you can come. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say
there is. You have polls. They have polls because most of these people who when you transition, it's not just like a one-time thing. It's like a broken hand and you can go get fixed. Hey, now you're good, right? This is a lifetime commitment. You have to constantly be getting pumped with the right hormones and taking drugs and all that kind of stuff, right? And so they still have access to these people, and they ask them, how are you feeling? Do you feel like your livelihood has increased? Are you feeling better about yourself? And it goes up. That's the case. And like the vast majority of the instances when this is happening, the cases when they do transition is not because they're unhappy about the transition. Most of the time, it's just finances. They've run out of money, and so they're detransitioning as a result of financial necessity. The second reason, it tends to be pressure from their family and community.
Okay.
So to me, this would be very indicative of how skillful these specialists are at identifying actual instances of dysphoria.
It could be very indicative, but I think you're jumping the gun by saying this is very indicative of some sort of accuracy in people who transition.
What do you think a better metric would be?
Sorry?
What do you think a better metric would be?
I don't necessarily have a better metric. I'm just saying that you've jumped the gun. I don't necessarily have a counter methodology to calculate a more accurate statistic for whether or not someone is, psychologically or emotionally or whichever one matters, satisfied with their transition.
Would you at least agree that is the best, like that would be the best metric to determine how
I will agree that the data is meaningful, but I'm not going to agree that it's meaningful about a specific thing, especially as egregious as saying we've got it right. Like the people who transitioned, they got it right. Like that's a jump. You jumped.
That's the thing. I didn't say they got it right. What I said is they're very good at it. You agree there are instances of actual gender dysphoria, and there are instances where the gender dysphoria isn't actual, right?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. So if they're seeing extremely low detransition rates, wouldn't that be, and also after the transition, the people tend to be better. They experience better life, better mental stability, better happiness, all that kind of stuff. Wouldn't you say that that's probably indicative of them actually having gender dysphoria?
It could be, but again, when the word "better" is a person.
It's subjective, but that's
it's subjective.
Of course, it's subjective. But like, if I ask you,
I understand
it's necessarily. Go ahead.
it's subjective by nature. That's what we're dealing with. That's the realm that it's in. I get that, and I don't want to, say, oh, I can't comment on it. It's too subjective. I don't want to take that. But at the same time, I mean, it's just a stretch. It's a stretch. It's a stretch to say these people are better. These people are better, and we can, based on what, I don't know, a polling or their response or what have you, we know this to be the case.
Sure, but that is the only way you would do it. So that's why if you wanted to talk about, let's say we have people who suffer from depression, right? Now it's a demonstrable fact that you can give people certain types of medication to improve.
Sure.
Right now, and if you ask them how is your daily experiences after the medication and before, right? And they could tell you, hey, after it, it is better. That is necessarily subjective, right? Because it's their opinion whether or not they feel better.
Yes,
but I mean,
right.
that is
that's what I alluded to earlier.
Okay, but that doesn't make it unscientific, is what I'm saying.
No, I'm not saying that it's unscientific. What I'm saying is that we cannot jump the gun on what the data is telling us. That's what I'm saying.
Would you call this an ideology?
What an ideology?
The idea of being trans. Is this what you are afraid of being taught? And it's just one of the things you're afraid.
I'm not afraid of it being taught, but yes, I would say it is an ideology.
Okay. All right. So this is interesting. And so why do you think it's a ideology?
Because I think that why do I think what is an ideology? We get more.
So the idea of being trans and
yes.
and the gender and stuff that goes with it. The idea of gender and sex being different and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so if you were to ask me what is a man, I would say it is an adult human male. That's how I would describe a man. Same thing with a woman. It is an adult human female. And I think that those definitions are hard definitions.
And I can show you examples. So because one thing you ran into a problem is like when we talked about a definition of a man, you said adult human male, right? Mm-hmm. So like what's a male?
A male is someone who has male reproductive organs.
Okay, so if someone
and more specifically male chromosomes.
Okay, so what if they didn't have male chromosomes? Would they still be a male if they had a penis?
They could be.
Well, okay, you have a soft definition.
Yeah, not by your definition, right? Because
well, I think the genitalia that you have is resultant in your chromosomes. So what matters?
They don't always match, though.
Hold on. What matters most are the chromosomes. So if you have, I believe, is it male is XY and female is XX? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, if you have XY chromosomes, but for some reason you don't have male genitalia, you are still a male. You are a male.
Okay, so you have XY chromosomes, right? Mm-hmm. You have a vagina, uterus, like functional fallopian tubes. You have the ability to get pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a hypothetical scenario.
Mm-hmm.
All right. This is something that can happen. Mm-hmm. All right. You're saying that's a man.
I'm saying that scientifically, any human who has XX chromosomes is a female, XY chromosomes is a male. Now, if there are situations where someone with XY chromosomes has a vagina, fallopian tubes, uterus, and can functionally reproduce, I would argue that is a deviation from the norm. Would you agree? And not even a deviation from the norm, an extreme deviation from the norm.
It's definitely a deviation from the norm. But
here's the thing: I believe I can state factually that humans are born with 10 fingers, even though I myself was born with 12 fingers. It's a deviation. And that's actually true. I was born with 12 fingers.
Sure, but what we're talking about is how you classify something. Because here, I'm saying there's a person with XY. They have breasts. Mm-hmm. They have periods. The ability to get pregnant. Mm-hmm. And you're saying that's a man.
Based on their genetic.
Based on chromosomes. Yeah. So by your definition, men can get pregnant. Men have gotten pregnant. And
men have had babies because there have been documented cases of XY chromosomic people having children.
And
as a
about
adult human
what would you
female.
say? What would you say in terms of percentages?
It's really low. It's exceptionally rare.
Dude,
But some men can get pregnant.
I actually
by
know the
your definition.
statistic here because I'm a nerd. For deviations other than XX and XY, it's about 2% of the entire population of Earth. And there are quite a few deviations from this number. So there's XXY, XXX, XYY, XXX, sorry, XXYY, XXXY, XXXX, XXXXY, XXXX. All of those are deviations from XXXY. Anything extra or anything that does not fit XXXY is a deviation. It composes about almost 2%. I believe the actual number is 1.7% of all humans.
Sure.
It sounds like
so then what? So if you're dividing humans up into males and females, you're leaving men, women, that those sort of terms out of it, but just male and female. What are the and all those different variations of X and Y chromosomes and their genetic makeup? How do you describe those people?
well, it varies.
Or how do you categorize is better?
So it varies because there are some intersex people that will tell you they're a woman.
Okay.
And because they look like a woman. I was watching a TED talk today of this female. She was intersex. She was also infertile, but she had breasts. She looked like a female, had long hair. To me, I'd put her in a category as woman, but she wouldn't fit your definition because it sounded like earlier you had said you would categorize a woman as an adult human female. And Correct. It was like you thought you had this definition that would include the entire set of what we would call women and exclude everything that isn't a woman. And it doesn't do that. Reality is gray and fuzzy. And we put boxes around it for our understanding to help make definitions.
Sure.
And so the definition you thought you had like a set definition, and I saw this quote from Matt Walsh.
I stand by that definition because when you say the world is gray and fuzzy, there are gray and fuzzy portions of the world, but we give names to items based on the extraordinary consistency within them. That's how we categorize things. That's how we look at people and say black or African American or white or Caucasian is based on consistencies, based on the consistency that they share with like my skin tone versus your skin tone versus his skin tone. It's like it's just a way that we categorize.
Well, so there's a couple problems with the way you're doing this, and one is that I mean. And this is, I think we pointed out simply for irony, but it is something I'd like you to address, is that by your definition and using chromosomes, you have people that are undoubtedly falling in the category of men that can actually get pregnant and have children. And you have people.
And you're saying undoubtedly falling in that category based on my definition?
Yeah, based on your definition. Yeah, because you're strictly basing it on chromosomes. And chromosomally, these people are male or female according to how you've defined them. But, like, you know, scientifically and in reality, they can have children, or they can have different organs, and they can produce different gametes, which is the second problem I wanted to bring up, is that that's not how we determine sex in science. We don't determine it based on chromosomes. We determine it based on gamete production.
Okay. I remember we talked about this last time we spoke.
Yeah. You have those couple big problems with that. And then, like, the third problem is I want you to realize how big 1.7% of 8 billion is. And that's 136 million people. So I get that a lot of people just throw out like, oh, it's only like a very small number and these are outliers. But something I think, and I'm not blaming you specifically, and I'm not saying that you do this specifically, it's just I get the impression a lot of people that are really far right, and I don't even know where you stand on it, I'm just throwing it out here in general, that people that just throw out, oh, it's a really small number, they're a minority, they're an outlier, don't realize there's 136 million people in this category that have some of the most like in-depth struggle of any person on the planet, and then you're just saying, oh, it's just some small tiny number, like 10 of them in the whole world exist, and in reality there's 136 million people that would fall in this category that are struggling and then getting disregarded by people in the media that are on the far right. They're just getting thrown away like trash.
Yeah,
And so it's
certainly.
something and I'm not saying you're doing that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think regardless of what the number is, 136 million or even less, regardless of what the number is, it shouldn't be discarded. They shouldn't be thrown away. They shouldn't be, I think they should be acknowledged. I think they should be able to live a life that's healthy and happy as best they can. However, I also think what's more important than that is that we as a society, as a planet, as humanity, we have to come to truths. We have to come to things that we all agree, essentially all agree are, okay, this is our reality. And I think the people who fall outside of the spectrum of XX and XY, if they exist, which I know that they do, that's totally fine. And I have nothing against that. I'm not denying their existence. What I'm saying is that with or without their existence, transgenderism is still an ideology. And it's not limited to those people who have that scientific genetic makeup. It's expanded way beyond that.
So are you talking about like kind of like people who on Twitter or on various parts of the internet that are changing their gender like every other day, stuff like that?
I think, yes, they're included.
Okay. So there are definitely people who take advantage of this and go by, different pronouns just for attention, for kicks, right? So like I'm sure there's people that do that, right? But just because there are people who abuse this doesn't make it an ideology. Like to be clear, when you call it an ideology, are you saying that it's also not a science?
No, I'm not saying that it's not.
Okay, so it could be. So it could also reflect our best scientific understanding of the topic, but it would still be an ideology.
No. There's science within, and there's ideology within. They coexist, and so I'm saying keep the science, reject the ideology.
So let's say
keep that which can be scientifically proven. Repetitively scientifically proven, and reject the ideology.
So let's say I'm talking to a bunch of high school students, and there's thousands of them. Some are having these issues, right? Sure. They're male, females, non-binary, etc. Right? So what shouldn't I include in the material to help them? Because let's say we're talking about sex and gender, and we're talking about homosexuality and heterosexuality and transgenderism and cisgenderism. We're going to talk all about that. What shouldn't be included in the topic?
Well, I think there's a lot, but just at face value, okay, I would say the notion that any person on this planet simply decides their gender.
I don't think that I wouldn't agree with that. Because for me,
and so that's my point. See, that's where it comes into ideology. That's where
I don't know.
Away from science.
I don't know if people are teaching that though, because so like gender for me is a biological construct, right? It's formed in your brain, and so I never decided to identify as a man, or as a male. So I don't think trans people are doing that either. Like I don't think someone is deciding to be trans. So it's not just like I'm making this the decision. This is a part of who they are. So the thing that you just described, I'm not sure if that's being taught anywhere. I would be opposed to that unless there was some scientific understanding of that.
I'm glad we agree on that, and I'm not necessarily saying it's being taught anywhere. Although I will say. The best way I can describe it, the overall conversation, I believe most assuredly suggests that people, whoever you are are free to choose what gender they'd like to identify as. Most
Well, sure.
assuredly.
Okay. I know what you're saying there. All right. I think,
And I think that's not good.
but here's the thing. So it's not like if I was addressing a bunch of high school students,
Sure.
I don't know what the gender is. What I would do is I would go in with the understanding that they didn't choose their gender, but they can choose whether or not how they want to reveal that. And so by giving them the latitude of making that decision, you're allowing openness. So it's not like I'm saying, hey, you get to decide whether or not you're a woman. What I'm saying is you're going to tell me how you identify, and I will accept you as that. You know what I'm saying? And so it's very different.
With no limitation?
Well, under the context of gender, we're not saying like if somebody wants to say they're a tree or an attack helicopter or something like that, then we've seen memes, right?
Yeah, for certain
stuff like that. So like,
but again, so yeah, without limitation.
Well, I guess take me down a rabbit hole. Like I won't put a limitation on it unless I see a reason to do a limitation. What exactly do you mean by limitation?
Well, you said you would accept the gender that they like to identify as.
Yes.
So my understanding regarding gender is that they're essentially unlimited. There is no specific set number of genders one could identify as. So
no. Well,
and I know the people who try and be facetious about it use the term like Megatron or attack helicopter, and I'm not trying to do that. But no, let's go directly there. Like, what if someone identifies as something like that seems arbitrary at best in the gender conversation, like attack helicopter or Mewtwo, or what are we saying as a society? What are we saying as lawmakers?
Gotcha. So here, the context would be like under gender. There is no gender that's attack helicopter, right? So I know I think you remember.
What do you mean there is no
gender that's an attack helicopter gender? There's no such thing.
Wait, so is there a list? Do we know what the genders are that people are free to pick from?
Not exactly. They're not unlimited either. So I wouldn't say they're unlimited. But
you got to dig deeper into that. It's not a gender. So go ahead.
So what I was going to say is, so I don't know if you remember from last time we brought up this study about the brain scans, right? There are different patterns that male brains exhibit and female brains exhibit when solving problems, when thinking or doing anything. And they'll take male and females of very similar aptitude and intellectual capabilities and have them do a problem, and they'll solve it with very similar efficiency. However, when you look at the scans, their brains did very different things. And so using machine learning, they have this AI that can just look at this brain scan and determine whether or not you're a male or a female, just looking at the scan. Right. However, what we notice is that there are certain people who have a brain that operates like the other gender. Right. Those people tend to be trans. So you are in a male's body, right? You have a penis and everything else, but I might have a brain that operates like a female. So when a person says, I feel like I'm a girl in a man's body, that's a pretty damn accurate description of what's going on scientifically, right? So that's what I'm talking about. And so I wouldn't say there are infinite amount of genders either, because not all male brains have the exact same level of masculinity. They have hyper masculine brains and hyper feminine brains, and then most people operate on a spectrum.
Sure.
And that's what we're talking about, the gender. So you could say, so I have masculinity on this side, femininity on this side. You can say that you could go for an infinite amount of space this direction and never reach the other hand. So if you want to call that infinite, I mean, be my guest. But I call it is a spectrum.
Would you say every gender that someone identifies as has a certain spot on that spectrum that correlates with the gender they identify with?
No. So we talk about this is masculinity, right? I wouldn't say someone over here is a male and then someone like right here who's still far more masculine than feminine and say, oh, they're a different type of male. I wouldn't do that. So
no. That's not what I'm asking. I'm saying, do all the genders that people could identify as, do they simultaneously exist somewhere along the spectrum?
Do they simultaneously exist? You mean
do all the genders that someone could identify as, do they exist on that spectrum you just described?
No, not necessarily. Right. So because and that could be because brains are complicated. This is like gender. This isn't, when we talk about gender identity, this isn't something that we've completely figured out. Right. Because there are some brains that are super masculine, yet show some properties that tend to be hyper feminine. Yet for the vast majority of them, they're still a very masculine brain. And so that's what I'm saying. And so like using that type of science, bringing that into the classroom. Now, what I just told you, this isn't a matter of ideology. This is what the scientific studies are showing us. You'd be opposed to. Go ahead.
So if there's someone who has a brain that, upon having brain scans, we find that their brain operates closer to that of how a female brain operates, yet they're a male, they have male genitalia and XY chromosomes. You're saying that indeed they are not a male, but rather they are what they identify as?
I'm talking about the gender specifically. So not their sex, right? So I'm not saying
sex and gender, are sex and gender correlated at all?
Yeah, for the vast majority of people there are, but they don't know, they don't always map. But sometimes there are deviations. And to me, that is what I would call a trans person. So there's no trans person that I know of that has ever said that they're like a trans woman. She would say her gender is female. She wouldn't say that her biological sex is female. Because if your gender is female and your biological sex is female, then you're not trans. You're just a cis woman, like my wife and my daughter, right? So like that. What we're talking about specifically was for gender.
And so when it comes to sex, the terms some terms that relate to sex are male and female, but then terms like man and woman, that relates to gender.
Not necessarily. That's the thing. Like, the way we use the language, it swaps. Male and female could refer to sex or gender, and so could man or woman. That they're used those ways all the time. That's why we got to get very specific. Like, so when somebody say they identify as, like, if I were to walk in, like, if someone to know my chromosomes, and then I say, you know what, I identify as a woman, people, this tend to come from the right. People on the conservative side tend to think that what I'm saying is my biological sex is female. And then I'm a laughing stock.
No, I don't think that they think they're saying that. I think sometimes they just cherry picking and they just take the.
I don't know how many times I've had to correct conservatives on this issue.
I'm
correcting other people on this.
I'm saying conservatives. I'm saying they're cherry picking. They're just taking the easy bait. It's easy to come against a person like that and almost poke fun at them. So they're not delving into. I'm criticizing conservatives.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there are genuinely people who do not understand the difference. Look at our episode, Can Men Get Pregnant? We had a guest who's still adamant about that. And he still says that. He
And I
still
just wanted
says
to point
that
out.
he still thinks that sex and gender are the same thing. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Fly.
well, yeah, I am interested to listen to that episode, but I would imagine that what he's really saying is that the two are inseparable.
Yeah, but I want to point out, this is where I was going to go with that, actually, is that not only is it very complicated biologically and neurologically when it comes to sex and gender, but it's also quite complicated when it comes to language. For instance, like you said, you're asking about male and female and man and woman, right? But I can give you examples of things that you would never use man for, but you would use male for. And like,
okay.
I can
Yeah, let's do it.
with,
That's
okay,
interesting.
like for instance, how would you describe a adult male whale? Would you ever use the term man?
I would not.
Right. You know why you wouldn't use the term man?
What's
Because
that?
it's a pretty specific thing to humans. So when we talk about man and woman, we're actually typically referring to humans. And when it comes to like gender ideology, when you say I'm man, what most people are doing, subconsciously they're associating man with masculinity. And so you don't associate whales with masculinity, so you don't call male whales men. You call them males. Because they don't demonstrate anything to do with masculinity. They're not, out grunting and lifting weights and being the quote-unquote alpha. They're whales, right? And if you see somebody that kind of falls in that hyper-masculinity, you may indeed perform a brain scan, and they may be really far on the spectrum of hyper-masculine. Versus someone that, maybe they have low testosterone levels, or they're just not a super masculine individual, might come closer to that line of.
To cut you off, I'm not clear on why you mentioned that though. As far as when you use the example with the whales.
So I was just mentioning, like, not only how is it complicated when it comes to biology, because it is, but it's complicated when it comes to language, because people are using terms sometimes interchangeably when they don't mean to, or they're using the same term to define something that's different than what they're saying. For instance, when I say male, I try to be very specific about the fact that I'm referring to sex.
Okay.
And when I say man, I typically am referring to human, but I'm also typically referring to their gender. Because if I use those terms interchangeably, if I said they
I guess I'm not tracking with you in terms of where people are getting this wrong.
Because oftentimes, like for instance, a trans male, right? Someone who is born biologically female and identifies as a male. When you say, or identifies as a man, right? You can't say they're a male because that's referring to sex, but you could say they're a man because that refers to gender. Right? And that's where I was going with the whale thing. You would never call a male whale a man because that's not, you're talking about sex, not gender. So there is a undoubted difference between the two in your vocabulary.
I'm still not tracking with you because I don't see where the mistake is. Where's the, like, everything you said, I agree. Yes, I would not call an adult male whale a man, right? The terms man and woman I do reserve for humans, so certainly. But I guess where's the inconsistency? What's the
inconsistency comes when people incorrectly identify male as man and vice versa, and female as woman.
Give me an example though.
Well,
or
for
if
instance,
you can, or even a hypothetical example, just because I'm not.
No. Like for instance, in your classic opening to how you define man and woman, right? Male and female, or man and woman. You said an adult male human, right? But you can't use male and man interchangeably because you recognize there is difference between the two terms. So now we have this more obscure definition that we have to delve into because now you don't have a firm definition of the word male.
Okay. Yeah. So I agree. You cannot use the two interchangeably. And I stick by my definition of man and woman, adult, female, human. But I guess I don't see So I certainly didn't use them interchangeably, and I know you're not accusing me of that. But like,
No.
I
I'm
guess
just
I don't
saying
know where.
the typical association is that they can be used interchangeably, and when people are identifying as something, it's important to make that distinction. And I think that's where AAA was just kind of like getting, or at least I could be in the wrong area here altogether. But what I was saying is, when he says, like, if he were to walk into a room and say he identifies as a woman, right? People automatically just like take woman and associate it with female and go biology. But when you say woman, instead of doing that, you go to gender and neurologically instead of
You're saying
biology.
that's what people should do.
Yes.
Instead of going to sex, you should go to gender.
Well, when you're using certain terms, you should use them.
Yeah.
You know,
like if he were to say, "I'm a
specifically.
woman." But
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, the term should be used specifically to refer to what you're after.
Well, I agree with you. They're not interchangeable, but I think even people who say that they're interchangeable, I think honestly they're misspeaking regarding what they actually mean. I think what they really mean is that the two are inseparable, that they're eternally and permanently correlated at such a high clip that you can't have that it makes sense. Like, most men are males and most women are females, and I shouldn't even say most, but essentially all, minus a tiny few.
Well, I mean, a tiny few by 136 million people.
Well, I mean, the scales, it's about percentages and scales, so
Yeah, but I mean, like, is there an example of 136 million people that's small?
Yeah.
I mean, again, like, this kind of goes back to my point earlier where we're disregarding 136 million people.
No, it's
You're
not
like,
disregarding, but it's just, but we can't play fast and loose with the numbers just because it's a high number. We got it, like, right? Like, I'm sure, if I cut off the very, very tip of my pinky finger, I'm sure there's 100 billion cells within that chunk of meat. But then it's like, wow, that's a lot of cells. And then it's like, well, compared to what? The rest of my body? Or it's just right? So it's like those things are relevant. Even I know it's a lot of cells, and I know in this 136 million, that's not a small number in and of itself. But I think when we're talking about, again, because we establish fact based on consistency, so the percentages matter because that's what consistency is derived from, is the percentage, how often it occurs this way.
There's a question in the chat that I think might be relevant to the discussion. So Top G commented, he says, "Why does this spectrum only address gender? Why can't I identify as a Chinese woman? If we're going to disregard biology when it comes to gender, then why not race too?" So
I was going to ask that, but I was going to ask
good.
that.
Cool.
But I will. The reason I didn't is because
I got an answer.
I noticed that. No, I got you. I'm just saying the reason I didn't is because I noticed that you guys tend to go super scientific, and when you're talking about brain scans and things of that nature, which I think is great. I think that's very healthy for this discussion.
So to answer the question, so he says, if we're going to disregard biology, we're not disregarding biology. Like the scientific study that I suggested, that we were literally looking at brain scans.
Yeah,
the brain is a biological component of your body, so no one's disregarding biology. Biology is a huge component of it. That's like all of it. Right. And so this is now, if why does this spectrum only address gender? Why can't I identify as a Chinese woman? So what constitutes a Chinese person? I would argue that it is part of a spectrum, right? So what percentage of Chinese are you? Are you an eighth? Are you a fourth? Are you fully? And also, are you Chinese? Or are we talking about nationality? Or are we talking about ethnicity? I mean, so there's a spectrum along with that as well. That what constitutes a Chinese person or a Chinese woman isn't some concrete thing that you could identify. Because we discussed a few weeks ago, like, what makes a black person. I mean, it kind of varies, right? Yeah. So J. Cole is black, but his mom is white, right? But we consider him just as black as anybody else, right? So like it's not a concrete thing.
I did not know J. Cole's mom was white.
yeah.
Never knew that.
And
all right, so,
dude is a super strong proponent of the black community and born to mixed parents, and like it's just you just don't think about it, but yeah.
So,
You know,
so,
interesting.
what did you think about my response to that? Do you disagree?
No, I agree. I mean, I think that's super interesting because what exactly is a Chinese woman? And and I do think nationality and ethnicity, like which one are we referring to? And I think that, man, that's interesting. I'd be interested to talk more about that. But no, I don't necessarily disagree with your definition. But I think,
Okay.
but I
Would you
would
be
be
okay with that being taught in the school?
with what being taught in school.
So teaching that gender is on the basis can exist on a spectrum, and that in its appropriate way to address someone by their gender instead of their chromosomes or whatever is dangling in between their legs. Right. So let's say there's a guy, or I want to say a guy. I poison the well. Let's say there's a person who has XY chromosomes and testicles and the penis, all that kind of stuff, right? And identify as female, right? Like what's going to be our instruction toward that?
Yeah. So I think what is, as far as that's concerned, I think we should teach along the best we can with scientific consistencies. And I'll give an example I gave earlier. If you're a anatomy teacher, I think that you should teach that humans are indeed born with 10 fingers. And then essentially a sentence after or later, you could say, however, there are some humans who are born with 12 fingers. There are some humans who are born with 8 fingers or 6
But I don't
fingers.
feel like it answered the question because we have okay.
No, I was going to say. So I think the scientific facts are always worth mentioning and discussing. I think we have to be extraordinarily careful.
But they are. It's the sciences that's what's being taught.
No,
right?
Yeah.
But it sounds like you were calling some of that ideology. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like there's a lot of people on the right who just don't understand this, and they call it all ideology, and just say it's like trans people just pretty much just don't exist. Any person who identifies as a woman, they're just lying if they're chromosomes.
If I can, real quick, and I'll make it really quick. I want to address the comment. One of the comments. Zach says these 136 million people businesses need to be explained more. Earlier in the conversation, we were talking about chromosomic changes and chromosomic differences between just XX and XY. There's about 136 million. That's a rough estimate. It's about 1.7% of the entire population of Earth that are born outside of the typical XXXY chromosomic nature that was used by Niko's definition to define man and woman earlier in the show. So just wanted to kind of clear that up. To answer that question, 136 million refers to strictly people that don't fall into either XX or XY. That's nothing to do with anything else. That is literally just scientific number stats.
So there's another comment. I wanted to see if this is something that you're concerned with, Niko. So it says a comment from M. It says, "Don't you think that liberal teachers are an influence into why kids are confused about their gender? If you keep telling children they can be any gender, no wonder we have confused kids." So, like, is that a fear that you have? Do you think there's some liberal agenda somewhere, or there's teachers that's trying to prevent children to be trans or anything like that?
Well, I'll say there's a difference between things that you sort of feel are occurring versus things that actually are occurring. So for me, I'd say I do have, based on whether it be articles that I've read or videos that I've seen, I do have indications or inklings that, man, it sure seems like there's an overarching agenda, but I haven't gotten to the point where I'm willing to say definitively this indeed is happening and here is the evidence thereof. So
gotcha. So I would say regardless of whether there is an agenda, for me, the agenda seems to be acceptance, not an agenda to confuse or convince children to become trans. But if there is an agenda to indoctrinate children to become trans, I can tell you that there is no scientific evidence to suggest that's possible. Society or teachers can't
to suggest that what's possible,
that teachers could convince students to become trans. That doesn't seem to be any more possible than to convince people to become gay. Like this is when I was talking about gender, right? This is something that is ingrained into your neurological processes. Like a teacher is not going to be able to overwrite that and make you think like a woman and make you trans.
Sure.
So we're approaching the end of the show. But
can I answer that comment real quick? It's really long. I don't want to read the whole thing, but I do want to respond.
Okay. Can we wait to at least towards the end until we get Niko last words?
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
Well, I was about to ask something. I forgot. What was it?
So, you said you were going to ask me, or?
Yeah, I was going to ask you something, but I just forgot what it was.
So,
I think.
Talking about
I lost my train of thought.
Okay, so
go ahead, Fasad.
Essentially, before I jumped in there and was asking about the comment, you were talking about how gender ideology in schools. We're essentially saying if there is an agenda to kind of push people into it, there's no evidence that a teacher could convince someone to become trans, just like there's no evidence like you could convince someone into being gay or homosexual, right? There's no good evidence that you could kind of talk someone into an ideal or an ideology that they don't possess. And I don't know what his question was, but I think what AAA was pointing out at least was that the idea isn't to push like transgenderism on people to say like everyone is trans or that everyone is, whatever. It's just to be more accepting of people that are. I apologize that I made you miss your question, AAA, but I know that's the topic.
It's all good. Yeah, all good. So like I was wanting to just ask you this final thing, then we'll give you last word. Would you, knowing this, if the information is grounded in scientific studies backed by data, would you be opposed to that being taught in school? Sex education, along with the concepts about gender and all that kind of stuff. Well,
my initial response would be no. Okay. But I think I would want to dig deeper. I'd want to what is shown by scientific data, and then how do we translate that data into curriculum? What exactly of the data are we teaching? Because if you're a statistician, or not even, but just someone who's familiar with data, you know that it's easy to manipulate data. And so I'm not saying people would, but the reality is people could. And so I would say yes, whatever can be proven undeniably, verifiably with scientific study and research is, and yeah, scientific. Well, I won't go down that rabbit hole, but
okay,
I'd say yeah. However, with a sharp eye of scrutiny.
Okay, there are also people who believe that the reason trans people exist and intersex people exist is a result of a naked guy 6,000 years ago biting a fruit. Now, would you be opposed to that being taught in school?
Absolutely.
I did not straw man at all.
Absolutely not, baby.
Okay. All right.
And I'll tell you why, man. And we can get into this another time. But one of the things, I love it. Absolutely not, because what you just said, I believe that you're referring to the biblical story of Adam and the origin of sin entering into the universe, or at least never mind, I won't go into that.
Yes, because the people calling what I just described, this ideology, the scans, all the data, they're calling that ideology, and they want to teach what I just said. Some naked dude bit of fruit because a snake told him to, right? And that's what happened, right?
A serpent, not a snake.
A serpent, a snake. Well, okay, whatever you want to go. Okay, it doesn't make it any more scientific. But okay.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I'll say yes, because that's a biblical story, and that's the biblical origin of the world and the origin of sin, and the Bible is indeed true. And so, again, truth.
We'd love to have you back on for that.
Truth can and should be taught, and the Bible is true, and it's shown itself to be true over thousands of years. And there's only one question that needs to be asked when it comes to the Bible: was or was not Jesus Christ the human? Was he a liar, or was he lying? And if we can answer that he was not lying, then the whole thing is true, and it stands on the fact that he did not lie at any point in time during his existence on this planet. So, yeah, that could be taught in school, but that's biblical truth, man.
Okay. So next time we have you on, I want to talk about that. All right.
Let's do it.
We will. You will be surprised.
Just out of curiosity, and we're not going to go down the rabbit hole. This is more of a yes or no. I promise it's not a long question, and it's not a trap. We're not even going to go down the hole. Are you a biblical inerrantist?
Am I who?
A biblical inerrantist.
What is that?
Do you believe that the Bible
you said inerrantist?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe the Bible is
biblical inerrancy? Like, is the Bible true in everything that it says?
Yes, it is. Yes, I am.
Okay.
And yes, it is.
This will be a fun conversation when we give it back on. I can't wait.
You don't think it's just good for teaching. You think there is nothing wrong with it throughout the book.
There is nothing wrong with it throughout the book. Nope. That's correct.
Cool.
Okay.
Are we wrapping up?
Highly advise
you get last word. We don't need to go down the hole right now.
I most assuredly will.
Okay.
All right. Are we wrapping up now?
Yeah, we're wrapping up. Did you already
last
address
word? Always you.
Zach's question? Okay, yeah, last word, Niko.
Oh yeah, Zach's question real quick. I addressed it in the comments. Zach, you can read through those. The really long and short of that is that we were talking about how Niko's definition of XYXX would be, if you're defining that as man and woman, then there's 136 million people that don't fall in those categories. That's it. I'm not saying anything else to the nature of it or what they identify as or anything else. Just long and short.
Also, one quick thing. So Top G comment, he says you guys should have a quick open discussion. I could bring up lots of interesting points that haven't been traversed, maybe. So we'd be down to have an open discussion. Thing is, right now our channel does not generate enough traffic to do something like that.
Yeah.
We were to start a live, we couldn't guarantee that people would actually be in the comments saying things. But Top G, if you want to come on the show, hit us up, email us, or comment on this video, and we can get on.
Yeah. Also, we try to, as you see, we try to answer comments live. So, or not necessarily right in the moment, but if we get a good break, we'll try to answer them. And if it's really important, just tag one of us or mention us, and we'll try to get to it. But other than that, last word of the show goes to Niko.
Man, I can't thank you guys enough for bringing me on and having this conversation. These conversations are not easy; they're difficult, and especially when you're dealing with people who are emotional, have strong opinions, but I stand firm that the way we move forward is by engaging in these difficult conversations. So always approach them, always attack them. And so I'll give you guys credit for allowing me to come here and do this. Good, very good discussion. I will say you guys have given me some information and some facts, if you will, that gives me pause, gives me a reason to go back and say, okay, let me read a little bit more. Let me study a little bit more, which is exactly what I want. Now, I do have mostly firm beliefs, but I love the fact that you guys stood on what you believed in, and you gave me something. You gave me more information to go back and read about. And even at the end, some of y'all reactions and comments to my biblical, to the biblical, the
That's
Bible
a can
being
of
inerrant,
worms,
man.
my friend. That's a can of worms.
I can't. Yeah, no, I can't wait to dive into it, man. So, but no, this is fun. This is good.
Someone said you better
Awesome,
plug
man.
your TikTok.
Someone said what?
You better plug your TikTok.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. For certain. Well, I'll plug a couple things here if y'all don't mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on primarily Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. My channels that I consider my personal channels about myself, my brand, who I am, is Niko Nice everywhere. NIKO, NICE. But then I am very excited to announce, and actually this is my first formal announcement of my podcast, the Optimisery Podcast. We have live shows, we have pre-recorded shows, interesting topics. Majority is male self-improvement or self-improvement in general. But there's a dating segment of our podcast as well that'll be filmed live with a panel of anywhere from 6 to 10 people. Tune in. You can find me on, again, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at Optimisery X everywhere. And it's the Optimisery Podcast. So look forward to it. It'll be a lot of fun. And maybe I can have you gentlemen on sometime.
Awesome,
Yeah,
man. You'll be looking
honor,
forward to. And Nico's IG and TikTok is going to be plugged into the description of the video, so you just look down below.
Perfect.
So,
Thank you.
I'll
Appreciate
already
you.
put it in there. Awesome,
All right.
bro. Appreciate you coming on, Niko.
Man, always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
All
Yeah, man.
Triple A, you want to
Awesome.
wrap us up?
Oh yeah. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Next week we're going to be talking about employment and cybersecurity. Very different topic, not controversial, but people have been hitting me up like, "Hey, I want to get a job in cybersecurity," so we're going to bring up a guest to talk about that topic. So, all right, see y'all.